Welcome to Blockchain on the Supply Chain. My name is Lizette Chapman. I'm a technology reporter here at Bloomberg. And I just want to set the stage a little bit here as I introduce our fabulous panelists. We've got Ray Bajaj, the Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer for Cardinal Health. Ray, do you want to say hello?
Hello.
Tony Costa, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer for the Bumble Bee Seafood Company. So
Good morning, Lizette. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Tony. We're going to be talking today about the supply chain on the blockchain. Now, the supply chain has never been perfect, and certainly during the pandemic, it's shined a much harsher light on the cracks and the imperfections than ever existed before. And now, while we have a lot of technologies, and both of you have been using these in your companies for quite some time before this, and it has helped with having complete and accurate information. As we were talking earlier, no technology has held as much promise, perhaps, as the blockchain has for increasing efficiency, accountability, and transparency. So we're very fortunate to have this conversation with you today, talking about exactly how you're using this technology at both of your companies in two critical areas for our world, which are healthcare, Cardinal Health, and food with Bumble Bee Seafood Company. So perhaps we can just dive right in and start hearing first from you, Tony. How is Bumble Bee Seafood Company using blockchain technology in your supply chain?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a really interesting use case. A couple of years ago, I was challenged to kind of get better visibility into our global supply chain for our frozen business, and so I took a 24-hour flight and a 2-hour ferry ride and went out to Indonesia and kind of went through the supply chain and eventually figured out that we had an incredible opportunity to use the blockchain technology to trace our fish from catch to can and incorporate our entire supply chain through that process that has traditionally been pretty manual. And so we did a co-innovation project with SAP that ended up being really revolutionary for the industry, where we can literally track the fish from the can down to the fisher.
Wow, that's great explanation. Ray, can you share a little bit how you're using it there at Cardinal Health?
Yes. Good morning, Lizette, and nice to meet you, Tony. Let me talk about 3 use cases that we are leveraging blockchain technology, and we are seeing a lot of progress in adoption of blockchain. The first use case is around supply chain integrity, where we are identifying counterfeit and fraudulent medications in our supply chain. And not only we are weeding out, we are reporting it to our partners as well as to FDA. The second use case is around the finance of distribution business, where we are reimagining contracts management process. We are reimagining our chargeback process, and everything is built out of blockchain technology. It has implication to customer experience. It has implication to liquidity of our company. So that is a great use case where technology is turbocharging the reimagination of the business. And the third use case is around precision and personalized medicine. We run special supply chains that require temperature control, and chain of identity and chain of custody becomes very, very important to us. So blockchain is the area of interest in reimagining that process.
Okay. Well, this sounds great. And it sounds like this is something you have both invested in. Are there any downsides to investing in this? I mean, we have talked about what's the ROI on it? When did you first make the first investment? How has that evolved? And how much have you invested to date?
Yeah, I'll chime in. I don't know if there's so much downside as there is some challenges. And for us, if you take my example, from the moment the fish is caught to it goes to the buyer, to the preprocessor, and to the finished goods. That whole entire supply chain, we don't own any part of it. Those are all relationships. And so for us, it was critically important for us to develop those relationships and then make sure that they understood the value proposition. So what traditionally had been, selling fish with a handshake and cash and paper, a paper trail, is now we've been able to kind of take that and put it on a digital twin to provide that technology throughout the entire supply chain. So for me, it's not so much a downside, but it's just a challenge of really explaining and getting the cooperation from our third-party partners to contribute the data and have the confidence that it's immutable and secure.
Yeah,
Has that
Lizette,
conversation? Please, Ray.
So Lizette, from our side, I will second what Tony was talking about. Any new technology comes with the risk. It's an emerging technology, and we partnered with a Bay Area startup, Chronicled, and we created our blockchain solution. How the solution is designed. Privacy becomes a very important issue for us. What data is going to be shared? What data set is going to be private? Who has access? Who will be invited to join the network? Become an important technology constraint when we were designing our system. And the key thing for us is adoption inside in the industry. And for that, we need to make sure that we are clearly articulating the value for all the industry participants on the technology platform, whether it is regulatory risk, operational efficiency, business process improvement, and the value has to be distributed across the network. I say this thing in many platforms that blockchain technology is like playing a team sport, and we are better together working in new ways.
Right. That's a great analogy.
If I could interject.
Please.
If I could interject one thing, because I thought Ray brought up a great point, and that is not only the relationships with the suppliers, but we partnered with the in-country NGOs, the Ministry of Fishery within Indonesia, USAID, to give that relationship even more credibility, to prove to the supply chain throughout, we're a global company, to let them know that the privacy and the access and we leverage a secure blockchain throughout the entire process, where we give access to that information to the individuals within the supply chain. So what had traditionally been a manual process, now for the first time, they have a digital record to go back and say, how much did we pay for this fish last week, last month, last year, and have better visibility into their own supply chains as well.
Right. That makes sense. Going back to the team sport analogy, and it only works if everyone buys in and works together on this. How has the conversation changed during the past year? Certainly, headlines have been filled with news about crypto breakthroughs and investing and certainly new innovations on the blockchain. Has this helped the conversation with some of the partners in nudging them over to accept this, or to start new conversations with partners?
Let me go first on this one, Lizette. If you look at inside the pharmaceutical industry, there is a marquee legislation passed in 2013, which is Drug Supply Chain Security Act. And I will give a lot of credit to that regulation, where the acceleration and adoption of blockchain has increased because of that regulation. And it is 10 years, soon it's going to be 10 years from an implementation of that regulation. So that is one regulatory framework that is helping the acceleration of new technology incubation like blockchain. The second thing, what I'm going to say, is the global pandemic. We are sitting in the center of healthcare supply chain, and we have a responsibility to make sure that our supply chain is resilient and we are ensuring supplies to the front lines. These are personal protective equipment. We need to innovate faster. We need to onboard suppliers faster. We need to get new routes, new backup lines. And for that, we need an architecture that is real time and intelligent. And unfortunately, our architecture, that is built, it is on patchwork of legacy technologies. So the pandemic is a great force for change and innovation. And the last thing I'm going to say is there are some industry forces that we are seeing in pharmaceutical industry, which is track and trace. That US system is built on track and trace, and there will be a point in time in future where there is going to be complete visibility, end-to-end visibility across the supply chain soon.
That's good. Tony, I saw you nodding your head during a couple of the points Ray was making. Do you want to jump in?
I do. Ray brought up a couple great points. One, pandemic, and then governance. Obviously, we all face the challenges of the pandemic, and I've been doing in consumer goods for over 30 years in my career, and I've never seen a more fast SKU rationalization project in my entire life. So we were forced as a company to really look hard at our supply chain and our ability to continue the velocity of product on the shelf. And so with the pandemic, luckily we had launched and implemented our blockchain in early 2019. And now more than ever, people want transparency. They want to know where their fish came from. They want to know it's safe, it's sustainably caught, and all the above. So, from a pandemic perspective, it did force us to really take a hard look at our supply chain, our business processes, and how we went to market and going forward. On the flip side, when you talk about industry governance, we are a part of a cross-functional interoperability team looking at and led by GS1 for global standards around how you share information, you collect information. We did a really innovative collaboration with many of the leading technology firms to figure out how do we do blockchain interoperability, because there's only so many ways that you can catch a fish and deliver that to a consumer, and we're doing many of the same things. But driving those standards and alignment and adhering to those are critically important to adoption going forward.
Got it. Can we go back to what you said about industry standards and regulation? Are there certain guidelines that you would like to see adopted that would make your lives easier, that would smooth out some of these bumps?
Well, we already are enforced by the FDA on how we import product and fish. There's a simple import monitoring process that we've actually automated through our blockchain. FDA came out with the Rule 204 that we're starting to adopt and everybody adheres to. So there's a lot of industry, regulations already in place, and Ray touched upon some of those on the healthcare side. But it's really, how do we drive the data standardization across how we capture master data and manage that and use it consistently throughout the industry. I think that's a critical part going forward.
Right. I saw Ray nod his head when you said data standardization. How is that playing out within Cardinal Health and some of the initiatives you're doing? Maybe you could talk about how this was used during the pandemic with the distribution of PPE and other things.
Yeah. So before I talk about the PPE, let me underline we are in a regulated industry, and a Drug Supply Chain Security Act is gonna evolve over a period of time. It does not cover all the pharmaceuticals, but a different class of trade will be covered in the future. Maybe infusion drugs, maybe medical devices. It goes to a granularity at a lot level. Maybe in future it's going to go to a unit level. So we as an organization needs to continue to evolve our technology and architecture so that we can keep in pace with the regulation. So that is part number one. Part number two is what we are very much interested in is a legislative action that is happening in the state of California, as well as in Arizona and Nevada around smart contracts. When smart contracts get a legal tender, you will see the skyrocketing of adoption of smart contracts. And we have so many use cases inside Cardinal Health where we want to unlock payment transactions using smart contracts. And also from a data interoperability, this has been a key barrier for us, because if you look at pharmaceutical supply chain, you have manufacturer, you have distributor like Cardinal Health, you have group purchasing organizations, and then you have dispensers. Everybody have their own systems, and system interoperability and data interoperability becomes a key issue. And that is what we are trying to solve with this blockchain, which is the plumbing of how data interoperability is going to happen across the different businesses.
That makes sense.
If I can
go ahead.
Just one more point, sorry. I think the challenge is that the standards are behind the technology and the acceleration of technology. And Ray brought up smart contracts and a variety of different things. You're going to see these platforms from a technology perspective to enhance and deploy a lot quicker, and the capabilities. They're really, the technology partners have done a great job putting these into, packages that you can implement fairly quickly. But the standards in and of themselves, and we worked again a lot with many of the industry leaders around defining the events from the time you catch a fish to you sell it and process it, and all the key data elements and all those kind of things. It's not that complicated, but driving standardization and getting everybody to agree tends to be a little bit of a challenge.
Do you think this is an opportunity for the federal government to step up rather than wait for the different states that you had mentioned earlier?
I'm not sure how much I can say, but we're working with the federal government. We're working with, we just had a meeting this week with one of the key agencies that wanted to understand, the interoperability project that we're participating on, and how can they leverage that from a private sector to bring to the government sector and share in learnings, and that we can, bring those both to the market at the same time, because we're, as I mentioned before, we still have, customs and regulations and different things that we have to evolve. And it's a great partnership if you're working with the government to help define those standards from a private industry, because it is a little different. And I think we both have a lot to bring to the table when we're sharing those experiences for, the long-term success of this platform.
What do you think, Ray? It's time for the feds to step up and help in this area?
I think the feds is going to be looking at first what states are doing, and there is already some legislative action that is happening in some states that I talked about. And once we get the legislation right in some of those states, there's going to be early adoption of the use cases. And then we are part of a MediLedger project where we have distributors, we have pharmaceutical companies, we have group purchasing organizations, and we are working on what are the legislative actions that we need to create so that we can create this incubation, so that we can create technology modernization. One area that we are lacking behind is the business to business transactions have to be real time and intelligent. And we need an architecture to make these transactions real time and intelligent.
Looks like we've got time for maybe one more question, and then I guess it's going to be open to some audience questions as well. Kind of going off what you just said, Ray, about where you see this going, is there a specific future use case that really excites the team internally in terms of where you could see this going? What would be your dream use case?
If you look at my dream use case, Lizette, I'm going to be talking about supply chain, visibility, end-to-end transparency between the supplier, between the manufacturer, distributor, as well as dispenser. There needs to be a national track and trace system that is built over blockchain technology powered by IoT that will help us with the vision of real-time, intelligent, as well as completely automated. And it's going to be better for end consumers as well, so that they can get the provenance of all the transactions that are flowing through the supply chain.
Okay.
Excellent.
What about, same question for you, Tony?
I agree with a lot of what. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Ray was saying. From our perspective, we're just scratching the surface of the capabilities of what we're implementing. For example, we test all the fish that we produce, and all of those lab results are on our blockchain. And so, being able to extend some of that to the more to our buyers and retailers, we don't think the consumer in and of themselves will want to see the test results. Are very detailed and complicated, but things like that, as well as we're continuing to work with administrative industries or fisheries in Indonesia on how do we get technology farther back into the supply chain. For our example, we work with handline caught fish out of Indonesia. They go out in these 25-foot skips, and they'll go 5, 7, 8 miles out, and they will hand catch tuna. And that's what's brought in, that we buy, and it's all fair trade or MSC certified and all these kind of things. But how do we get technology back to the fisher in those small villages in the remote islands of Indonesia? And I got one anecdotal story. We went and did we filmed a documentary on our project, and we're sitting there. And as a technology leader, I'm always hesitant going to these third world countries to overextend technology. And we're there on the shores, and I look over, and I promise you, there's about a 10-year-old boy and girl. They both have Samsung tablets sitting there on the shore doing whatever they're doing. So the technology is there, and we need to figure out how to extend that to drive efficiency wherever we can take advantage of that.
That's a great example. Do you see, kind of extending that a bit, do you see cost savings from this, kind of extending down the line? How will that play out for consumers